All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. How are you all doing? Welcome back to this class. Welcome back. You might not have had any classes yesterday because we had snow again. I certainly wasn't here. So, today we have something to talk about. Anybody want to guess what it is? The midterm! For me, the midterm was a... Okay, something has gone horribly awry here. Stop. For me, the midterm was a great success. I was very, very happy with it. And let me explain why. This in one set of statistics explains why. The mean was a 75.8, the median was an 81, and nobody got a perfect score on the test. Yay, me, yay. Okay, now you're thinking, why is this so great? The problem I have when I write tests is I need to write a test that is able to accurately kind of assess where people are. If like the mean is a 95 and half of you are in the 95 range, I haven't done a good job differentiating the people who have done really thorough learning from those who have not. If the score is too low, then I end up not making the exam too hard to actually demonstrate what you know. So this worked out quite well for me. So I'm happy with it. Sir? I didn't measure it. So if you really want to know, email me. Yes? That is your score out of 100. Oh, you already have your scores, don't you? Oh. All right, well, let me explain how you're doing, okay? 71, I forgot I posted those, and I have them to get back. But 71 and below, I have concerns. If you have not received an email from me about your grade, you're probably doing okay in the class. You're probably going to make it. I don't expect you to, like, not make it, okay, if you didn't receive an email from me. 84 and below, you're doing okay. You should be perfectly happy. Things are going well in your life. 89 and below, you're doing great, absolutely great. 90 and above, you are a fucking rock star, okay? And I will be in my office this afternoon when you come and bring your major form to sign and become a computer science major, okay? Any questions about that? 90 and above, you're doing absolutely fantastic, and you really should consider becoming a CS major. All right, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand back the midterms so you can look at them. We'll go over them for a while. I have all the code. All right, so on the class video, I'm going to edit out the discussion of the midterm, so you won't be able to look at that. But moving on, by now you should be focusing on the project, which I believe is due Thursday. All right, Tuesday. Any questions about the project? We're going to work a little bit more on code related to it today. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Okay. Yes, that sounds like, so the question was there's a bullet point about using constants, and there may not be any constant. That might just be a cut and paste error. So, yes? There's also a point that says all items from the menu have to be in a function. Yes. Okay. So, when you write this, you're going to have a menu. When you choose a menu option, that menu option, you're probably going to have a switch statement that said if the user pushed X or B or whatever, that should call a function. The functionality for that option should not be implemented right there. You should call a function. If you need to do like a line or two of code to do some input or something simple, that's fine. But you should use a function for each one of those menu things. Yes? Okay, you don't have to call a function for that. You can call the exit or return function. How's that? It's not really a function. I'm lying. But okay, that one doesn't. So, with the exception of that one. Other questions? Yes? Nope, they'll hit one of the letters that's specified in there. So, did you run my test program that has like little letters? You just push a letter. Okay, do you all want a big hint? I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but I've taught this class before, and I've posted the solutions to previous projects. You are allowed to go back and look at the solutions to previous projects for ideas on how to structure your code. Okay? And there's some people nodding because they're and with happy looks because they've already figured that out. But if you go back and look at like project 3 from last semester or any other semester, you will see code that uses the same functions that you need to use, the same way of doing things. Okay? The problem is different, but the methods are similar, and that will give you an idea of what you need to do. Other questions? Yes? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the question comes up of how to do search. Well, and the question how to do search, you need to know how your data is stored, right? Before you can do search. So here in general is how I would suggest that you structure your storage. There are a number of things in the file that you have to read. There's like first name, last name, age, gender, and camp. Is that correct? So each one of these 5 things you need to keep track of for each individual. But they're all slightly different. First and last name are strings, age is a number, gender is a character. Is that what we made it this time? And then camp is a string. So what you're going to do in your program is you're going to have 5 vectors. One vector is going to be the vector of first names, one is going to be the vector of last names, one is going to be the vector of ages, one is the vector of camp, one is the vector of gender. Okay? The way that you tell a particular person out of this vector is by the position. So the 0th element in each vector is going to be one item from that person. Does that make sense? So the first time you read a name from a file, first name 0 is going to be that first person. Last name 0 is going to be the last name of that first person. You all with me? So you have 5 vectors, and you know that all items across all 5 vectors belong to the same person based on which position in the vector they're in. Okay? So when you do this search, the question then is that you're going to have a loop, and you're going to say, let's look for somebody who's a certain age. You can loop over all the ages. And when you find an age that fits the range you want, you can look in the other vectors to get the corresponding first name and last name. Okay? So that's how the search is going to work. All right. Sir? Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah. So something like, people can't be younger than 0. It's unlikely that people are going to be, over 120, for right now. So, yeah. Pardon? I don't remember what I put for the specs. Did I just say throw a warning when you read it, or did I say stop the warning? Yeah. So when you're reading the file, when you hit the option that says like load file, as it's loading it, you go, hey, I found this is bad, but I'm going to put it in there for the time being anyway. You should just know. But you should use it once it's in there. Does that make sense? Don't try to work around it. Just throw a warning and then let it be in there for the rest of the time. Okay. Sir. Yep. Yes, so the question is if you're using a switch statement that will jump to various functions, which is what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you end the program? Okay, so the question is how to get a while loop that loops forever until someone hits Q. There's a bunch of ways to do this. The way I do it is I set a Boolean variable named done or finished, and I set that equal to false, and then I say while not done loop, and then when they hit Q, I say done is equal to true, and then it finishes. That's how I do mine. And if you look in the sample projects, you'll see that's how it was done. Like, not the sample projects, the solutions from other semesters. Sir? I don't know. None that I can think of, but maybe. I mean, have you all figured out by now there's a lot of ways to do the same thing, right? So I don't have like a canonical, this is the very best way to loop while choosing menu things. So. Yeah, you can do it. You can try and do it as pretty as possible. So, like the more of this, it's like when you're writing things, do you ever notice like when you're writing, you learn and you're like, oh, I could do that a little bit better and stuff. So the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. If you look at other people's code, which you're not allowed to do for this, that would help too. So, In the past, I've tried to do a peer code review thing where everybody looks at each other's code to get ideas. It's just a logistical nightmare, and I haven't figured out a good way to do it, so we're not doing it this semester. Other questions about the project? All right, we're going to take a 1.5 minute break in place because you are looking like crushed your wills to live with the exam. It was great. It was a good exam. You all did really well. It was a hard exam, actually. I thought the average was going to be like 60, and I'd made it too hard, and it was way better. So, round of applause for you. Who needs candy? Oh, there we go. Ooh, saving that one. What? Yeah, there doesn't seem to be trash in here, so take your trash out when you go. Anyone else? Going once? Stand up. Stand up. You look like death or something. I don't know. Yes? If you go to my webpage and you click on like teaching tab at the top and then you look at all the other classes, like on the left column, there's something that's like the classes I've taught in the past, class classes. Look for anything that has like 051 or 071 in it. And that, like seriously, all the projects for this class have been similar for like the last, I don't know, 10 years or something. So. All right, well, let's get back to it then. So before the midterm, we were talking about functions, and we had learned that functions have parameters. There are two types of parameters we've seen so far. They are reference parameters and value parameters and reference parameters. What is a value parameter? When you pass something by value, what does it get passed? Have you all forgotten this? Do we need to go back? Do I need to actually pick on people? I'm happy to do it. Yatpang, what is the difference between a value and reference parameter? What? What? I can't hear you. What is a value parameter? Uh-huh. Okay, how about someone else? He's not ready to play. Kelsey Reed, what is a value parameter? Nope. Matt Reichman, where are you? You're here. What is a value parameter? Oh, come on, you had like a whole minute to look it up. All right, let's try this again. Catherine, what is a value parameter? No, that is actually the identifier, the type of it. Okay. What's a reference parameter? So the difference between a value and reference parameter is whether they have an and or not inside them. What does the and do if you have the ampersand? Yes, a reference parameter. Any changes that happen to the parameter, any changes that happen to that parameter in the function are also reflected back where it was called from. A value parameter just means you get a copy. If you pass something in by value, the value is copied from where it is sent to the function, okay? So, let's go back and look at what we were actually trying to do some long time ago. Was it like a month ago? So long ago. Oops, wrong. All right. Do you remember this example that we started our discussion about functions with long ago? And what we were trying to do is, given a bunch of mammals, be able to look and see if a particular mammal was there. Remember this? We did it before. We had fluffy kittens and spiky puppies and stuff like that, right? But our goal, instead of having that whole program where we read stuff and did things, was that we would just be able to write a program like this that said something like load mammals from vector and search for mammals. And that would be essentially our whole program at one. And the nice thing about building programs this way is that when we read this, we look at main, we say, oh, we have some mammals that we're working with. Here's what we're going to do with it. We'll load some mammals, and then we're going to search for them. Okay? Everybody down with this? So the idea here is that now, instead of having a long, complicated program, we break our program up into functions. The functions have names that are meaningful to people, and that when we read the code, it makes more sense. In this sense, isn't this almost like what we were talking about when I was talking about like algorithm design and how I design algorithms? You just put high-level functionality. These things are function now, and we're good. Now, I do want to change this into vector because that makes more sense as a name, but we'll load mammals into a vector, and we will search for mammals. So now that we know about value parameters, where value parameters are just a value that gets copied over, and reference parameters, where anything that happens to the thing that's put in the parameter inside the function gets reflected back, we can actually write this code now. We have everything we need to do this. But, actually there's no but. We have everything we need to do this. So how about we go ahead and do that? How's that sound? Yes? Okay. So, if we're going to make these functions, we actually have to have function prototypes. So who wants to help me write a function prototype for load mammals into vector? And for this, I have the highly prized Kirkland brand Reese's peanut butter cup knockoff. Who wants to help me write a function prototype? Scott. Uh-huh. Okay, so it's void because it's not going to return anything. Why isn't it going to return anything? Okay, so we don't have to return a vector because we're loading something into the vector. Yes, sir? Okay, so there's a couple of ways we could do this, all right? We need to give this function a vector, and let me just... we need to load things into a vector, and we need to give it a vector to work on. So we won't put anything there, but we do need to put this vector of string, okay? And we have a couple of choices. We need a way of getting the information that this function gets out of the file and passing it back to where it's called in main. So how do we normally return values from a function? How can we do that? We can use return, and we can use return because there is only one vector we're working with, right? But if we had more than one vector, would we be able to use return? We wouldn't. We would have to use a reference parameter. So what we're going to do here is, just for practice, even though there's only one thing, is we're going to use a reference parameter, because that is pretty much what you're going to have to do in your program anyway. All right. For the other one, if we search for mammals, what do we have to give this? Like if we're just going to look through the vector to see if a particular mammal is there, what do we have to give this? Yes, question. So the answer was bool. Where do you want to give it a bool? If it's, we can have a bool to return whether it's there or not. You want to do that? Sure. And we have to pass in a vector for it to work on, which is going to be a vector of string. Okay. So now we have our two function prototypes. And in fact, if we go down here and and put mammals in, there's a slim chance it will actually compile. Say that again. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry about that. All right, so let's see if this compiles. And it might actually complain that it couldn't find the actual function below. So sometimes you can get away with a function prototype, and in this case we couldn't. I mean, it would never actually run, but sometimes you can get away compiling. So here we go. We want to write a function now that will load the mammals in to a vector. And we're getting a vector of string and it's a reference parameter, and I'll just call this mammals. So now we have to figure out for this sub-algorithm what steps we want to take. Okay? What steps we want to take. So what do we have to do to read a vector of string in from a file? Yeah? Use the while function? Eventually, but if we're reading from a file, there's some other stuff we have to do first. So we have to open the file. Then what do we do? Error check, yep. And what's the name of the file we're going to be reading from? Do we know? How do you know that? Okay, so right now we use the mammals.txt from last time, but one of the things we might want to do is just, allow the user to have different files. So how do we do that? Okay. So here's our sub-algorithm. Input from the user for file name, open the file, error check, read into vector, and then we're actually done. We're done because any changes we make to the vector here, because it's a reference parameter with the ampersand, get reflected back to the main program, and we're good. So most of this we should know, right? String, gosh, obviously we've not been typing enough over the break. String file name. All right, so this should be familiar. String file name, see out what file to use, get line file name. Open the file, we need what? How's that? Is this going to work? Why is this not going to work? Because this file name is a C++ style stream, and because of the oddities surrounding how open works, it expects a C style string, so we put C underscore file name. And I see a lot of you are like typing like crazy trying to keep up with me. I'm going to post this on Blackboard. You can just download it later. So, but whatever works for you. All right, now that we've opened the file, what do we have to do? Okay, and that's probably good enough for our purposes. We'll just error check and we'll just return if we didn't get anything. All right, now how do we read into a vector? With a loop. Let me just take a quick look at something. Okay. For purposes of this, we're just going to assume that all the animals have one word names instead of multiple word names. Okay. Because it gets a little bit harder to read into a thing that has, you're reading a whole bunch of strings and knowing where it is. So we'll just say while, we need a string, which is the current animal that we're working with, and we say while input file. This should look pretty familiar, right? What do we do now? Okay. All right. Anything else? At this point, we should be done. Yes? Uh-huh. Okay. So the question is, on the project, we are inputting many things out of the file at the same time. And the question is, how do we handle that? You do not want to have one loop to read the first name because it gets complicated, right? That would be crazy. Let me just put it that way. So what you want is you want a while loop that reads all 5 columns at once. Does that make sense? So you have a while loop read all 5 columns. And inside the loop, you will have first name.pushback, last name.pushback, age.pushback. And so you'll have 5 vectors that you're pushing the 5 elements all inside that one loop. Does that answer your question? Sir? So the question was, could you have a vector of vectors? And the answer is yes, you could. My question is, I don't know a reason why you would want to do that for this project. Like, there are circumstances where you have vectors of vectors. Okay, so that each person's data would be its a vector. So the problem is that now we have the problem that you're mixing up data types, because first name and last name are strings, age is a number and stuff like that, and vectors can only hold like types. Does that make sense? So having a vector within a vector doesn't work. Soon, I promise you, shortly, like next week, we're going to learn how to glob, congeal, lump data of different types into one thing. Like right now we have vectors, and you can put a whole bunch of the same thing into one vector, a whole bunch of the same type. Next week or so, we're going to start learning how to make something that you can put different stuff into, like different types. Okay. And by the way, remember I mentioned the class kind of ramps up? You were asking me for class. That's right around where the class ramps up. Okay. All right, questions so far? So, if we compile, do y'all think this is going to work? How many of y'all think it's going to work? How many of you don't? Why not? Yeah, other than that. But this particular function, do you think, how many of y'all think this function is right? How many of you don't? How many of you have no opinion on the matter? So the question is, do we have to return anything down here? And the answer is, we don't have to. It's a void function. So what happens for void functions, if you don't put return down here at the bottom of the curly bracket, the compiler will put one in for you, like an invisible one. So essentially we can write this, and that just shows where we return. You don't need that strictly. It'll return automatically without it. Yeah, pretty much all compilers will do that. So, it doesn't hurt to put it there because explicitly people can see what's happening. Yes, sir. Yeah. So the difference. So the idea of parameter is that it's input into a function, right? Like a function is a sub-program that we're going to run. And it has input into it that it needs to work, which is the form of parameters. And it sends data back through the return, right? How many things can we return? How many different values or types of values can we return? I'll give you a hint. The answer is 1. Like in return, you can only return one thing. So if we want to have a way of passing data back from where a function is called, from a function to where it was called from, right? We need a way of passing more than one thing back at a time. And one way of doing that, and the way that C++ does it, is that you have this reference parameter. And the idea of a reference parameter is if I'm a function and you give me something to work with, any changes I make to that value in the parameter also get made on your end as well. So in this case, what's going to happen is we're going to call this load mammals into vector with this with that variable mammals. And this variable mammals right here, I'm going to split the screen so we can look down at the function below. When we called low mammals into vector, this mammals right here, which is inside main, right? We created it there. It gets passed as a parameter. It gets copied down here into this parameter right here, which is also named mammals. But I just misspoke because it doesn't get copied because of the ampersand. It creates a magic link. A magic link between this mammals right here and the one back here in main. So anything that happens to this parameter named mammals down in the function also happens to this mammals up in the main part. And I've probably confused you a little bit by using the word mammals over and over again. Like it probably would have been better for me to use a different variable name because the name itself doesn't matter. Okay. What happened is we created a string, we gave it as a parameter into the load function, and down here it gets linked magically with this other thing that happens to have the same name. So what's going to happen is after we've done this load, anything that's loaded into this vector down here, it will also have magically been loaded into this vector up there. Does that kind of help? Yeah. Sure. Yes, it would be exactly the same. The compiler and the computer don't care what the name is. Like the name is just for people, right? Because we suck and can only remember names. The ampersand is a way of linking whatever parameter we have here with whatever parameter it is given up here, right? So if we give it a parameter here, any changes to this mammals that down in the function will also affect this mammals in the main function. And I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again, and that generally means that I'm missing like what you are missing. Anybody want to try and ask me that question about why that's not clear? So it's not an assignment. Think of it like this. It's a magic pipe. Okay? I mean, and we're going to see what causes the magic later in the semester, and it'll become clear to you what's going on. But right now, it's just a magic pipe. Here we've said, okay, we have this. Everybody understands what we're doing here, right? This is in the main function. We're creating a vector that contains strings. It's a container that holds a bunch of strings. Its name is mammals. So we have this thing named mammals. It is a container that we can shove strings into to our heart's content, and later we can go pull them out. Thumbs up with this? All right. So what we're doing now is we're saying, hey, we have this sub-algorithm. We want this sub-algorithm to operate on this container. So we give it the name, and the program goes, oh, I'm working on this thing you just created up there. I'm good. Down here, we get this thing. We say, oh, look, we're going to be given something, and the thing we're going to be given is a vector of string, right? And we're going to call whatever we're given. Down here, we're going to call it mammals. Doesn't matter what the name is up there, but down here, we're going to call it mammals. In this case, it happens to be the same. But this ampersand right here is the magic pipe. And it says anything we do to this vector down here will also automatically be done to that vector up there. Yes? Okay, in this case, we're not doing any returns because it's a void function. We're not doing anything returns. So if we had animals right here and we changed it to animals, it would be exactly the same. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go change that to animals. How's that? Oops. Okay, great. So now, down here, this string is now, this vector that we're receiving is now called animals instead of mammals. Yes? Uh-huh. Nope. If we created another vector up here, let's call this one rodents. And by the way, when I find myself doing this, this means something is going horribly awry in class, if I'm just making stuff up. So here we created a vector string called mammals, and we passed it in. We also have a vector called rodents, and we're not doing anything with it, right? When we call this function down here with mammals, it says, I know you created multiple ones. Just use this one and only this one. Everybody with me? Thumbs up. Who's with me? Uh-oh. Who's with me? Who's against me? How many of you all wish it were still spring break? Not me. Okay. All right. So do you kind of see what's happening? Yes? No. So the question was, would you only use reference parameters if you were using a void function? And the answer is no, you can mix them. However, if you are using a reference parameter, then the thing you're returning will probably not be one of the things that you're given to work with as a reference. You can mix them. Often if you're mixing reference parameters and return, what will happen is the return will actually be like an error code or some sort of indication of what happened, and then the actual data will be in the reference vector or whatever you're doing. Sir? Split them up into subphylums? Yes. So what you're saying, there's a lot of different things you can do, okay? For what we're trying to do here, sorry, you two are being loud. Can you stop for a moment? Thank you. For what we're trying to do here, we're just trying to say, hey, here's a vector, load a bunch of stuff from a file and put it in there. And the way we've chosen to get the data back is by using a reference parameter instead of the return statement. The fact of the matter is that in this case we can use either because we're only working with one vector. If we are working with two or more vectors, and is anybody here in this class expecting to work with two or more vectors in the near future? Yes? Anybody expecting to see work with like 5 vectors? Then you must use reference parameters because you cannot return and pass 5 things back by return. Okay. In C++. Other languages you can, but not this one. Yes. You can have as many reference parameters as you like. Up to the limit of the languages, I believe, is like 1,024 parameters. So. How? You just put whatever you need. It would look something like this, right? So you just put multiple. I need a comma at the end. You need to separate them by commas, right? Yeah. All right. So I have the feeling today that I am trying to teach past what I taught before. And I feel like I've skipped something because the questions that I'm getting are not quite what I would expect. How are you all doing? Yes? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. No. You are probably one person who's giving voice to the confusion that many people have. So, because for some reason you all don't like me or don't like talking to me, and when I ask you questions, you just sit there and try not to make eye contact really hard. So I have a hard time judging like how I'm doing. I'm trying to think. Here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest we call it a day because we only have a couple minutes left. And at the beginning of next class, I will attempt to do more of functions. Now, the problem is that I'm not going to be able to like extend the deadline on the project because we've had so many snow days. So you're going to have to like work on functions a little bit yourself over the next couple of days. Does that make sense? But I kind of thought we had covered this before spring break, and it seems that I'm mistaken. Yeah, Tim. Current animal. Like you have a current, you're reading one thing at a time, and you read from the file into that one thing, and then you push that one thing into the vector. Okay. All right. Have a good Wednesday. I'll see you Thursday. I don't know if we've all got spring break-itis or if I screwed something up, but we'll see what we can do then.